Good evening all and welcome. Tonight I have a chilling collection of scary stories from the basement. So grab your flashlights because it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I was born in Anchorage. I grew up in Seattle, but some of my best memories of my childhood were made far north in Fairbanks. That's where my grandparents lived. It was quiet, peaceful and safe. And in the year 2008, a few years after my grandpa passed, my uncle called my mum. "One of your kids needs to come here to help with grandma's garden. She's depressed and can't keep up." I didn't even think about it. I volunteered as tribute. So I flew to Fairbanks for 3 weeks, spent my days digging in the dirt with my younger cousin, trying to bring back some life to the wilting garden. But the house, it always felt uncomfortable. It was old, built in the 50s, survived a couple of tundra floods, and you could tell. The floors bowed and groaned, like they were tired of holding secrets. The front yard was so big that people sometimes mistook it for a park, but no one lingered. And then there was the basement. 30 narrow, creaking steps led down to it, far deeper than any basement just had a right to go. It stretched under the entire house, much larger than the main floor itself. But it wasn't just the size. It was the way it felt. Cold, still and stale, like the air had been trapped there for years. And it was full of stuff. Mannequins, vintage dolls, and toys that hadn't been touched since the 70s. All perfectly placed, like they were waiting for someone to return and play. But I was 16, and Grandma had fixed up a little apartment for me down there. It was cozy and private. It felt freeing. Until the first night. I woke up suddenly. No dream, no noise, just awake. The clock glowed red in the dark, and it was 3 a.m. on the dot. I blinked and realized something strange. The bed was perfectly made beneath me. Tucked sheets, tight corners. It was like I hadn't moved at all night. Like I'd just been placed there. And then the cold hit. Not the kind of cold that makes you pull up the blanket, nor even the kind that you'll feel during a blizzard. It was a cold like the chill of the grave, the one that seeps straight into your bones, and my breath fogged in the air. The sheets were stiff, and my teeth clattered uncontrollably. I curled in on myself, but it didn't help. And then there was the silence, total, suffocating silence. Not just the absence of sound, but the absence of life. No pipes groaning, no wind brushing against the windows, no creaking of the old house settling. The shadows in the corners began to move, or at least that's what I imagined them. But the longer I stared, the more sure I was something there watching me. That was it. I broke. I threw the blankets off, snatched my pillows and ran. The hallway was maybe 10 feet long, but it felt endless, and every step was a fight against panic. The second I crossed the threshold and stepped out of the mini apartment, the temperature seemed to return to normal. But I couldn't stop. I ran full tilt towards the stairs, slipped, crashed to the floor. And pain lit up my side, but I kept going, scrambling like something was chasing me, dragging myself. I shattered 2 toes slamming into the steps, tore my fingernails scraping at the wood as I clawed my way up, and I didn't stop until I reached the main floor and collapsed on the couch, barely breathing. My grandma found me there in the morning. She looked at me, smiled, and said, "Oh, you didn't like it down there?" I laughed weakly. "Yeah, I just like it better up here." For years I told myself I was imagining it. The basement was creepy, sure, but no doubt I'd just worked too hard in the sun and was having a weird dream. And then I watched The Conjuring. The clocks, the temperature drops, the silence, the dread, and everything returned to me in one cold rush. I never saw anything after that night, no face, no figure, but I felt it. Something was there, and it wanted me to know. I'm glad I didn't have to stick around that long and find out if it wanted to reveal more of itself to me. When I was a kid, my bedroom was in the basement. Not a cozy, finished kind of basement. This one was old, dim, and always was just a few degrees colder, even in the summer. I think the best way to describe it is that it always felt off, and there seemed to be a disconnect between the house and itself. Down there, you'd feel a bit eerie and never quite at peace, but in the house itself you'd be perfectly fine. One afternoon I was down there alone, playing with my toys in the quiet gloom. That's when it hit me, this strange sensation, like something had turned its gaze towards me from the dark. I remember freezing mid-movement, my skin crawling, every nerve screaming that I wasn't alone. Then I saw it. Just movement at first. My bedroom door was swinging open, slowly and smoothly, and it didn't make a sound. That should have been impossible. The door always creaked. Everything in that house creaked. But this was silent, and it almost felt deliberate. There was a little decoration, one of those cheap things kids loved, that my sister and I had suction cupped onto the glass pane of the door. I stared at it, my breath catching, and then it fell, not slid. It peeled off and dropped, like invisible fingers had yanked it free and released it. It hit the floor with a soft thunk, and something within me snapped. I bolted. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My feet pounded on the stairs as dread chased me, thick and close, like breath on the back of my neck. And I didn't stop running until I found my mum, panting, heart jackhammering in my chest as I tried to get the words out of what I'd seen. To my surprise, she didn't brush it off. No laughter, no comments on my overactive imagination. She walked back down there with me, turning on every light as she went. The room looked the same. It was quiet, but I knew something had been there. Turns out I wasn't the only one. Over the years, I kept feeling it, especially in the basement, like eyes in the walls, like something watching through the cracks. One evening, my dad had his own encounter. He and my mom were sitting at the dining table talking about something mundane, when his face suddenly changed. My mum noticed it right away, his eyes wide, mouth slightly open in disbelief. He didn't say a word, he just pointed. She turned just in time to see a bottle of Tabasco slide across the table, slowly and controlled, like it was being handled. No one had touched it. There was no wind, no vibrations, just solitary movement. My mum didn't say much, not until years later. That's when she told me she heard the basement door open and close all the time, when no one else was home. It wasn't just once or twice, it was frequent. She'd hear footsteps too. Faint, measured, like someone were pacing in the dark. She said the worst part was that it didn't feel random, it felt aware. And one night, she couldn't take it anymore. The pressure in the basement had gotten worse. The air down there felt wrong. She went down alone, with no lights on, just the hum of the house above in that crushing silence. She stood in the center of the room and said the only thing she thought to say in the dark. "I don't know what you are, but you're not welcome here. I belong to Jesus Christ and this house is protected. Leave." After that, the heavy sensation lifted. The door stopped opening. The footsteps faded. It was like the house let out a breath after it had been holding it in for years. We never figured out what it was. A ghost? Something worse? All I know is it wasn't supposed to be there. And I still think about the door swinging open in silence, about the weight of the air, about that Tabasco bottle sliding, as if someone was just testing to see how far they could go. I don't think it wanted to be seen. But once it was, it didn't want to go back to where it belonged. I'm just glad the activity subsided. Between 2008 and 2014, I lived alone in my dad's house. He'd moved in with his girlfriend, but the place never stopped feeling like his. The kind of echoing emptiness that holds someone else's presence even when they're gone. They would stop by now and then, mostly unannounced, pick up mail, do laundry. Once or twice her plumbing went out and she'd do her washing there while he ran his errands. It was a quiet afternoon. I'd come home early just after 2 p.m. The light had that washed-out winter look to it, pale, almost sterile, and I scanned the parking lot just out of habit. No cars, no sign of them. The house was still. I went inside, dropped my bag, and flopped into my chair at the desk, headphones on, and a comforting hum of the screen flickering to life. Same routine as always. Everything was normal. Then from below me, I heard it. Something in the basement. It started off subtly, just the soft metallic clunk of the washing machine door, then the unmistakable thump of wet clothes being tossed in, and the deliberate click-click-click of the cycle knob turning, and the low rumble of the dryer kicking on, vibrating faintly through the floor. There was no mistaking it. I'd heard those sounds 100 times before, but I knew I was alone. Still, I rationalized it. Perhaps my dad had dropped her off. Maybe she was down there while he ran out. It wouldn't have been the first time, and I told myself to relax. I knew I was being ridiculous. The sound persisted. The dryer's hum gave way to the shuffle of movement, the rhythmic folding of laundry, fabric, the creak of plastic as the basket shifted, and the dragging noise, the basket being pulled across the tiled basement floor. Then the stairs. Each step groaned under careful weight, and the sound rose towards me, like someone was trying not to wake a sleeping house. I pulled off my headphones, turning in my chair, eyes on the stairwell. Whoever it was would nearly be at the top. My heart was pounding as I leaned forward, expecting to see her crest the landing and relieve all anxiety in my body. But no one appeared. The footsteps ceased on the last step. I stared, waiting, my eyes straining for anything, breathing, shifting, something. But it was like the air had been vacuumed straight from the room, and cold slid over my skin like ice water, my limbs suddenly feeling tight. She was right there, or so I thought. One more step and I'd be able to see her face. I stood up, legs trembling, and crept towards the stairs. No voice greeted me, no teasing laugh, just the dim stairwell yawning downwards like an open throat. I descended slowly, each step resisting me like the house itself didn't want me going down there. When I reached the machines, I reached out and pressed a hand to the dryer. It was ice cold. Not just cold. Not it finished earlier kind of cool, dread. It hadn't been run in hours, maybe days. There were no clothes, no sign of anyone having touched anything, and I backed away, my stomach sinking like lead. And I heard it. Every part of it, the whole process. It hadn't been in my head. It was too real, too specific. I remember how the dryer had had a hitch at the startup. I even remembered how the dryer had that hitch at startup. It had done that. I grabbed my phone and called my dad, needing any kind of logic, any loophole my brain could cling to. They were on vacation, had been for over a week, 4 hours away, and there was no one else with a key. That night I packed up everything I had in the basement and moved it upstairs. I never went back down unless I really had to, and even then I wouldn't go alone, not without the lights on, not without something playing in the background so I wouldn't hear anything. We sold the house a few years later. I didn't say a word to the new owners. What could I say? Hey, I used to live here. The laundry room does laundry by itself. Good luck. I still don't know what I heard, but I know what I didn't see. And sometimes that's even worse. Today I feel like sharing about my Aunt Renee's old house, the one she lived in for nearly a decade before moving to Texas with her husband. It was a cozy house in Colorado, modern enough, not the type you'd expect to be haunted. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that hauntings don't care about aesthetics. She bought the place with her partner at the time, a guy called Sandy. The basement was finished, carpeted, clean white walls, bright lighting, nothing stereotypically creepy. She had a home gym down there, and also used it as her office. She was a criminal defense attorney, and needed the quiet. There was one small corner with a cement floor for the washer and dryer tucked under a shelf stacked with the usual laundry stuff. Even that area was well lit. It shouldn't have felt off, but it did. There was a tension down there, a sort of pressure to the air that made the hairs on your arms stand. That weird being watched feeling, but it was subtle. You could brush it off, chalk it just to overthinking or a draft. When I house sat for her, I had to go down there often to do laundry, and every time it got worse. On one particular trip, I was transferring clothes into the washer when that electric tension hit again. A full body wave of goosebumps, like something was creeping up behind me. I turned around and saw nothing, and told myself I was being dramatic, but I booked it upstairs anyway. When the washer beeps that it was done, I dreaded going back. I played it cool, shoulders back, trying not to show fear. But when I leaned into the washer to grab the wet clothes, I'm super short by the way, 4'11", so I had to hang over the edges, that feeling was intense. The dread, the pressure, the sensation that something was inches from the back of me. It was suffocating. I had to keep digging in that awkward position while it felt like I was being watched, stalked. I eventually scrambled back up the stairs and slammed the door behind me. Later, when my aunt got back, I casually mentioned how it felt off down there, laughing like I was being ridiculous. She didn't even blink. "Oh, yeah, that's Bob. We feel him around there from time to time, and he's mean, but he mostly sticks to the basement. Sometimes he moves around the bedroom, but he really just seems to like making people feel scared. Sandy always said that if he died before me, he was going to take Bob with him, so I'd never have to live alone with him." The thing is, Sandy did die a few years later in a motorcycle accident. They were riding tandem when he hit gravel and went down. My aunt walked away with a sprained ankle and some bruises, but Sandy didn't. A few days later, Aunt Renee was back in the house, sitting in the living room when she heard a loud bang and crashing upstairs in their bedroom. She described it as a fight, heavy thuds and furniture scraping, like someone was throwing punches and getting thrown. Sandy had been a third-degree black belt in Kempo karate. When she finally went to check, the room was in disarray, papers on the floors, blankets twisted up, and stuff that had been sitting there all morning was now knocked over. She said that was the last time she ever felt Bob in the house. But Sandy wasn't totally gone either. About a year and a half later, my aunt had moved on. New boyfriend, 2 young stepsons, and a fresh chapter in her life. I still babysat sometimes while she worked in her basement office or was in court. On one of those days, the boys were napping upstairs and I was curled on the couch reading. The front door was straight ahead of me, and on a hook just inside the door was one of Sandy's old flannels. My aunt wore it sometimes, said it brought her comfort. I glanced up from my book and saw him. Sandy, standing there, pulling on a shoe, not ghostly or transparent, but solid and real. He was wearing the flannel that had just been hanging by the door, looking like he was just ready to go out. We made eye contact. We both gave each other the smallest, softest nod. And then he was gone. No fade out, no turning around, just gone. Later at dinner, I told my aunt and she got quiet. "I've never seen him," she said, "but I know he's around. I felt the bed shift like someone was lying beside me, felt warmth against my back like he was cuddling me. He shows up less now, but I think he's happy I moved on. He once told me if anything ever happened to him, all he wanted me to do was to keep living and be loved." Now she's married to Matt and they live near the beach in Texas, something she and Sandy always dreamed of. She says she still feels Sandy sometimes when blue herons fly overhead, when their song plays unexpectedly on the radio, and when the wind carries a certain kind of warmth. Wherever he is, he kept his promise, and he took Bob with him. I've had my fair share of scary, borderline paranormal stuff happen to me. That's just what happens when you grow up in old houses your whole life. Weird sounds, cold spots, lights flickering, it's all part of the package. But nothing comes close to what happened when I was 10. At the time, my family was in between houses, and my great-grandfather offered us his place. He'd moved into a retirement home and wasn't coming back, so it was just sitting there empty. I'd been to that house plenty of times growing up. It always had some off energy, but nothing too wild. You'd hear knocks in the empty rooms, or the sound of stuff falling when no one was around. Enough to creep you out, but not enough to tell anyone. When we moved in though, the energy shifted. We were only allowed to live on the first floor and use the basement. The second floor? Off limits. No explanation, no reason, just don't go up there. I didn't like it much anyway, but after a while, I started noticing the door to the second floor would open on its own overnight, like clockwork. I told myself it was probably just my parents being weird, but deep down I knew something was wrong. Still, the real nightmare was the basement. It was mostly finished but creepy as hell. Multiple side rooms with heavy old doors, low ceilings, and just 2 lights that worked. The bulb above the stairs and the string light in the middle of the main room. It was always dim and dusty, and whenever I went down there, especially alone, I felt it. The air always felt off, and I never felt alone. One afternoon, my mum asked me to go down and grab something from the deep freezer. I didn't want to, but I didn't want to get in trouble either, so I went. Everything appeared normal, but that awful feeling was there, that pressure. But I told myself it was just in my head. I walked over to the freezer, opened it up and began digging. That's when I heard a loud crash from one of the side rooms, like something heavy had fallen over. I froze in place, heart racing. Still, I kept looking through the freezer trying to pretend it hadn't happened. And that's when I heard the footsteps behind me, getting closer. I slammed the freezer shut. I didn't even grab what I was supposed to, and bolted for the stairs. As I ran, the footsteps followed, booming like whatever was behind me was twice my size and stomping on purpose. I didn't dare look back. I hit the basement door and tried to yank it open, but it wouldn't budge. It was like it was locked. I was screaming and slamming my body weight against it, praying it would open. The footsteps were right behind me now, and then I heard something hit the door, and a loud bang. Right as it happened, it flung open. I didn't even stop. I launched myself through it, slamming it shut behind me, and I stood there shaking, trying to catch my breath. One more thud hit the outer side of the door, and then nothing. I ran to my mum, crying and freaking out, telling her everything. She called my dad, and he went to the basement to check it out. Looked through every room, every corner. Nothing. No open doors, no knocked over shelves, not a single thing out of place. Just the same creepy-ass basement it always was. After that, I refused to go down there alone. I mean it. I still hate basements to this day. Like even now, as an adult, I get a gut-wrenching feeling when I walk down those narrow stairs in some dark basements. Because I know what it feels like to be followed by something you can't see. And I'll never forget those footsteps. I'm the youngest in my family, which basically means one thing: prime target. My siblings loved messing with me, teasing me, and scaring the life out of me whenever they got bored. My brother especially took that job very seriously. He was obsessed with Scream, and every Halloween without fail he would dress up as Ghostface. He had the full outfit, the long tattered black robe, the glinting plastic knife, and the horrible white mask with the twisted, screaming expression. It was his favorite costume, and he used it year-round just to torment me. He's 9 years older, so when I was around 5, he put the mask on and started stalking around the house just to see how fast he could make me cry. This was his idea of quality bonding. One afternoon, though, it was just me and my mum at home. My siblings were out with friends, and my dad was working late. The house was calm and quiet, in an unsettling sort of way. I was helping my mum fold laundry when she handed me a stack of my brother's clothes. "Can you put these in his room, please?" Now, his room was in the basement, and as a kid, I hated the basement. I knew there was something wrong with it. I don't know what it was, though. I never felt comfortable down there, and the silence always put me on edge. I hesitated, told my mum I didn't want to go, and she gave me that classic mum move. "Come on, I'll time you to see how fast you can do it." Fine. I grabbed the laundry and bolted. Down the stairs, 2 flights, and the basement door flung open. The moment I stepped inside, I just felt odd. His room was all the way in the back. Every step echoed too loudly, bouncing off the concrete like I wasn't alone, and the lights buzzed overhead. I just tossed the clothes on his bed and spun back around, and that's when I saw it. At the top of the stairs, blocking the only exit, stood Scream. Black robe, white mask, motionless, watching. I froze mid-step, my blood ice-covered. My lungs wouldn't work. Every nerve in my body screamed to run, but I couldn't move. It looked at me, and I screamed. The sound that tore out of me didn't belong to a kid or a person. A shriek so raw and primal it echoed through the walls. I turned and fled deeper into the basement. I don't know why, pure panic I suppose, and I collapsed behind the water heater, sobbing and crying. My little heart thudding like I was going to explode. When I finally crawled back up the stairs, my mum was already there. She scoped me up, trying to calm me down while I spluttered out what I'd seen. She looked around, scanning the hallway. Then she shouted for my brother, demanding he come out. But the house was empty. She tried to reassure me. She said maybe it was just my imagination, or that I'd scared myself by thinking about that stupid costume. But there was something in her eyes that made her uncertain. That night we smudged the house. My mum walked through each room with burning sage, her voice steady but firm. She stopped in the living room and stood tall, speaking into the silence. "You're not welcome here. This is our home. There's no room for you. You need to leave." After that, things got quiet. We moved a year later for my dad's job up into the mountains. New house, but I'll never forget. And even now, some 23 years later, I still let myself picture it. The stairs, the mask, the stillness. And I get chills because I know what I saw. And whatever it was wasn't my brother. Because we found out later he had actually been outside playing with friends. Go figure. I don't believe in ghosts. I really don't. But this one memory, it's never left me. I was playing outside, basketball. It was noon, sunny, blue sky, the kind of perfect day that makes you forget anything scary could possibly exist. My brother, who's 10 years older than me, was upstairs, and my sister and cousin, they're both about 5 or 6 years older than me, were in the basement doodling on a chalkboard. I was doing my thing, vibing outside, when my brother came downstairs and opened the back door. The laundry room was right there at the basement level, and he told me to come inside. He was furious, and scolded me for being outside without asking, even though it was a gorgeous day. I stood there getting an earful when it happened. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something tall walk past. It was dark, like an ape or gorilla, but stood completely upright with long arms and a slow, heavy gait. And it wasn't just walking around naked or anything. It was wearing a full marching band uniform. Yeah, jacket, tall hat, the whole deal, and strapped to its chest was a large drum. It didn't look at us, it didn't acknowledge us, it just marched in complete silence straight into the bathroom that connected the laundry room to the other part of the basement. After witnessing it, I stood there frozen, my breath caught. I tried to grab my brother's attention, stammering, begging him to look behind him. There's something in the bathroom, just look. But he kept yelling at me and didn't take me seriously. And that's when we heard my sister. From the other side of the bathroom wall, she screamed and began to shout that something went into the bathroom. My stomach dropped. I hadn't even said anything. She couldn't have heard me. It wasn't just me. By the time my brother was done scolding me and went around to the other room where my sister and cousin were, my sister was pale, shaking and pointing at the bathroom, saying how it went into the shower. So my cousin pulled the curtain back and found nothing. Just your average old tub and faded tiles. No wet footprints, no marching ape, just silence. I tried to tell myself I imagined it. I mean, I do have a superactive imagination and I've always been that way, but I've never hallucinated. I've never seen anything like that before or since. And even now, years later, I can picture that thing perfectly. The shape of it, the slow, deliberate walk, the dull gleam of the brass buttons on the uniform and the white drum. The way it didn't make a sound, even though I swear I should have heard footsteps or the drum bouncing on its strap. And it happened in the middle of the day. No weird lighting, no dream state, just real. Not to mention my sister saw it. And every once in a while I still think about it. Like, why that? Why a marching band ape? And why did it walk into the bathroom? I don't think I'll ever get answers to this. A few years ago, I was quite well known in the bar scene. I bartended, DJ'd, bounced, you name it. One summer I took some time off, thought I'd chill, stay low-key. That didn't last. A friend called me up one day about a place in the next town over. Said they were trying to reopen an old historic building. In the basement was a bar that had once been a Prohibition-era hangout. Supposedly even Al Capone visited. People had perished there. A lot of them. And if you asked around, everyone had a story about it. It had been a blooming hotel and bar once. Then one day it just shut down. No one really knows why. But one thing everyone does say is that it's seriously haunted. My friend told me that her friend Julie was bartending there, and they needed someone to DJ and maybe bounce too. I agreed without much thought. I showed up a few hours before opening. Julie was already outside waiting, arms crossed, eyes flickering back to the building like it might lunge at her. "I'm not going in there alone," she said. That should have been my first red flag. We walked in together. Julie wouldn't even go to the restroom by herself. I had to stand guard, back turned. She didn't even trust the shadows in the mirror. We waited in the office for the owners to show up, and I tried to make small talk, but I kept glancing over my shoulder. I couldn't help it, there was just this presence. And Julie noticed. "Yeah, they're watching us." And she wasn't joking. At some point during our conversations, I heard slow, deliberate footsteps above us. Not creaking floorboards, not wind. Footsteps. Julie, who's a redhead and not the type to scare easy, went ghostly white. I moved like I was going to check it out, and she grabbed my arm. "Just don't." Then came the sound of furniture dragging. Something heavy, like a bed or a chair, scraping across the floor upstairs. It went on for a while and neither of us moved. Finally the owner arrived. He was cheerful, casual, and joked about the ghosts like they were his old drinking buddies, and told me some stories of his own, things he'd heard when he was alone in the building. We set up. The night was slow. Word had spread about the bar reopening, but it was in a small, out-of-the-way town and barely anyone came through, so we closed up around midnight. I helped clean and we all left together. Nothing too wild happened. I figured maybe it was all just hype and nerves. Until I pulled out of the lot. I glanced up at the second floor, just a glance, but it was enough. There was a pale, expressionless face watching me from the window. No one was supposed to be up there. No one had gone upstairs all night. I froze for a second. The air in my car turned cold and rigid. As my chest tightened, I blinked, and the face was gone. It wasn't the most dramatic ghost story, no screaming, no flying objects, but the feeling it left behind, the lingering stare, that stuck with me. I never went back. And honestly, I don't think I was supposed to. I used to live in an old military house somewhere in the USA. I can't share the location for privacy reasons. I must say its basement was deeply unsettling. Every time I stepped onto the third to last stair, I felt an overwhelming pull to look into the darkness, and no matter how hard I tried to resist, I couldn't fight the urge. And every time I did, I saw him, a soldier in Korean-era uniform hanging from the rafters. Despite how eerie it was, I never felt afraid of him. In fact, he seemed like a protective presence. I always believed he had been a good man in life, someone who had returned home from war only to find his wife had left him and taken their child. I think the heartbreak consumed him, and he took his own life. But instead of being vengeful, he watched over us. I especially felt his protection when it came to my son. One night, when my son was 9 months old, I was suddenly woken up by a voice demanding I check on him. I thought I was dreaming and ignored it until our dog started licking my wrists and pulling me towards his room. That's when I got to him. I realized he was in distress. I rushed into the hospital just in time and he spent a week there. But he survived. He's almost 19 now and perfectly healthy. The spirit also shielded me from my abusive ex-husband. While we lived in that house, my ex never touched me. He once admitted that every time he raised his voice, he felt an unbearable, heavy presence around him, almost daring him to go further. The one time he actually lifted his hand to strike me, a picture frame flew off the wall and hit him in the head hard enough to require stitches. As much as I felt a connection to that soldier, it hurt me to see him hanging in the basement. One day I spoke to him, telling him how painful it was to see him that way, and after that he never appeared to me in that form again. But my ex-husband still saw him every time he went down there. The day we moved out, I went down to the basement to say goodbye. As I walked away, I glanced back at the house and saw him standing in the dining room window, waving, and I felt like I was leaving behind a dear friend. I still wonder if he ever found his peace and managed to cross over. I hope he did. About 2 months ago, my husband and I finally moved into a new home, a fresh start, after years of struggling in a run-down house that was falling apart around us. We saved up and searched carefully, and when we found this place, it felt like a dream come true. It was beautiful, well-kept, and had good bones, but from the very beginning, something about the basement didn't sit right with me. The lights were dim, almost like they were trying not to work. The space was packed with the previous owner's forgotten belongings. Dusty boxes with broken furniture, old tools, and just clutter. But there was a weight to it, like the air down there was heavier. I chalked it up to nerves and ignored it while we began the long process of clearing it out. One day, while helping us sort through the mess, my son found something odd. A large, ancient-looking cabinet, hidden behind a stack of boxes in a dark corner of the basement that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. We opened it, and inside was just junk, random odds and ends, and we didn't think much of it at the time. But now I'm convinced the cabinet was holding something back. Over the next few weeks, our son began waking us up in the middle of the night. He said he could hear rattling coming from the basement. We brushed it off as the house settling or maybe mice. But night after night he kept waking us. He was afraid. And soon I started hearing the sounds too. One night my husband and I finally heard it ourselves. The distinct, rhythmic rattling of the cabinet doors echoing up through the house. We went down together. And as he opened the cabinet to check inside, something hit me. It was like a wave of nausea and fear wrapped together, an invisible presence that sank into my chest and made my skin crawl. It passed quickly, but I won't forget that moment. I think something came out. Since then, our home has turned into a nightmare. Objects that were stable and secure have started falling for no reason. We've heard scratching and thudding in the walls like something is crawling behind them. And worst of all, voices. Low, garbled whispers we can't quite make out, like something's just out of reach but listening. Then came the night that changed everything. A few nights ago, the sounds started, but this time they didn't stop. The noises grew louder and louder from every direction, banging, rattling, humming, droning. It was like the house itself was screaming. Every wall, every surface vibrated with noise. It lasted for what felt like an hour. We were frozen in our bedroom, too scared to move. At one point I saw someone, standing in the corner. A tall, shadowy figure with no face, just darkness. I blinked and it was gone, but I know what I saw. Thankfully, our son was spending the night with his grandmother. He didn't have to feel the terror we felt. Since that night, I've been doing everything I can to understand what we're dealing with. I never fully believed in the paranormal, but deep down I think I always knew. Now, I know it's real, and it's here. We're scared. We bought this home, we're tied to it financially, so we can't just leave. But we also can't go on like this. I'm considering bringing in someone, a spiritual expert, a paranormal team, anyone who can help. If anyone has advice, or has been through something like this, I'm listening. I just want my house and family to be safe. A few months ago, I started working in my basement more regularly. Nothing fancy, just a quiet spot to focus. It was a Friday morning, sometime between 10 a.m. and noon, when I first noticed it. 3 or 4 taps. That's it, just soft knocking, like someone politely trying to get your attention. I couldn't pin down to where it came from. Wall, ceiling, maybe even upstairs. I even considered whether it came from outside. I sit near a basement window after all, but it sounded like it was coming from inside. I brushed it off, maybe the house was settling, pipes or whatever. The next Friday, around the same time, there were taps again, but this time they were louder. 4 distinctive knocks, not random, intentional, like someone was knocking on purpose. And I'm 99% sure they came from the same general area, about 8 feet away from where I sit, the same spot as before. I was alone in that house both times, and after that things went quiet for a while. I can't remember exactly if anything happened, but next week I do remember thinking it had stopped. Then maybe a month or 2 later, the tapping returned. Friday morning, same time window. Fainter this time. I almost convinced myself I imagined it. You know how it is when you're waiting for a sound and your brain plays a trick on you. But I still noticed the time. Still a Friday. Then came today. Friday, 11:15 a.m. I was on a work call just doing my usual thing when I heard it. A music box. We'd only recently put one in the basement. It's finicky, sure. It'll blink a single note if you so much as bump it. But it wasn't that. It played 6 to 8 notes, not in rhythm, not a full song. Just slow, choppy notes like someone unfamiliar was trying to figure it out, or like it was being nudged. I joked to my co-worker, "Ghost's gonna kill me, haha," and ended the call. But then it hit me. Friday morning again. Another visit? I didn't think it was a temperature shift or vibration. It didn't feel like that. It just felt like a pattern. What's even weirder, years ago, my wife burned white sage in the basement. She said it felt off down there. One of our cats used to stand at the top of the stairs and scream any time we were down there. Not meow, scream. And after the sage, the cat stopped. This morning after the music box thing, I said out loud, "If someone's here, I just want you to know you've passed on. You're a ghost now. It's okay to go." I didn't know if that will do anything, but it felt right. Only time will tell, I guess. My name is Andy. I don't necessarily believe in angels, demons, God, the devil, but I do believe that dark entities exist, and what they are I don't know. When I was a kid, my family moved into a beautiful suburban home in Pennsylvania. It was my parents' first house, a decent-sized 2-story with a half-finished basement, and I was around 5 or 6, the oldest of the 4 siblings. Fast forward for a few years to when I was 8 or 9, when the memories started to burn into my mind. It always started in the shadows. My sister and I would see glowing red eyes peering from outside our closet. We'd scream and cry to our parents, yelling, "Rats with red eyes!" But of course they chalked it up to childish imagination, your typical monsters under the bed scenario. Things got worse. I started hearing my name being called in unfamiliar voices. My sister heard it too. We both slept upstairs where most of the activity happened. At first, my parents didn't think much of it, but then my mum began to experience things herself. She was a Christian and deeply spiritual, so she spoke to our pastor. He recommended cleansing the house, and I remember us walking through every room reciting prayers and drawing crosses in olive oil on the walls. It made things worse. The red eyes didn't go away, the voices became more frequent. I'd see shadowy figures moving just out of the corner of my eyes at night. My sister and I would scream, hide under the covers and beg whatever it was to just leave us alone, and our parents would run in, flip on the lights, but there would never be anything there. Objects would even fall when nothing touched them. Doors slammed, lights shut off randomly, chairs moved. It was like something out of a horror movie, and it felt like it was targeting us. My mum always tried to believe us, to comfort us, and she became a true believer. My dad was a skeptic, until one night when I came downstairs crying about the monster on the basement steps. He tried to reassure me that there was nothing there, when suddenly the door slammed shut, and I was thrown down the stairs by something I couldn't see. My mum yanked the door open and pulled me out, praying over me the entire night. That was only the beginning. Even after pastors and cleansings, the energy in the house got heavier. I remember being 12, home alone in the basement where the computer was. Nothing was open, no windows or doors. I heard a crash. Every single shelf on the wall had been pushed over violently, all at once. I bolted out the front door and waited outside until my parents came home. These weren't one-off events. They happened constantly. My dogs would bark at nothing. I'd see shadows shift across the walls. I'd hear whispers, feel watched, and get random chills down my spine. But my sister and I always got the worst of it. By the time I was old enough to really understand what was going on, I started praying. I'd recite Bible verses. I tried to rebuke what was there. Sometimes it helped. Sometimes it didn't. One night I woke up in a cold sweat. The TV was casting light across the room and I saw a huge, shadowy figure standing over my sister's bed. It turned to look at me. I froze and eventually ducked under the covers. I could hear it breathe. I felt it pressing on my chest. I don't remember what happened next. I think I passed out from fear. When I was 14, my cousins moved in with us after their caretakers, my grandparents, fell ill. My grandmother passed shortly after. That brought us even more people into the house, and they felt it too. We were all terrified of the upstairs and the basement. Some nights all of us would just huddle in a single room listening to furniture move and to footsteps creak and whispers in the silence. We had our pastor come again to bless the house, and for a while things quieted down. But I truly believe the darkness in that house fed off the pain. Things got worse for my family. My parents fought constantly, but I truly believe the darkness in that house fed off the pain. Things got worse for my family. My parents fought constantly. Eventually, they divorced, and my mum spiraled into addiction. We finally moved out into a townhome with my dad, but even as we packed our things and left, the house still felt angry watching us go. To this day, I can't be in a pitch-black room without feeling watched. I hate attics and avoid basements like the plague. I knew something was in that house. I felt it every single day for nearly a decade. My sister and I still talk about it from time to time. We're the only ones who truly understand what we went through. I don't tell many people this story, but I just need to share it. Maybe someone else has gone through something similar. Because no one will ever convince me it was just in our imagination. I work as a home CNA, and I think my patient's house is haunted. This started when I was doing laundry in the basement, which is where the washer and dryer are located. It's a dim space and the stairs leading down are loud and creaky. While I was loading the machine, I suddenly felt a presence behind me. I turned and there was Kat. She was standing there silently, staring at me with a completely blank expression. It startled me, but I calmly guided her back upstairs to her chair in the living room where she usually sits. Here's the weird part. I never heard her come down. The stairs are right above the washer and dryer, so they're impossible to miss when someone walks over them. Somehow she made it down the stairs without making a sound. I brushed it off and went back to switch the laundry a bit later, and as I was putting the clothes out, I did hear the stairs creaking. I thought Kat had come down again, but when I checked, she wasn't there. I panicked a little and rushed upstairs, only to find her sitting peacefully in her chair, eyes on the TV like she'd never moved. A little rattled, I kept going with my task, but while I was in the basement restroom, which is part of the laundry room, my stomach was acting up, and I stayed there for a bit. When I came out, the lights were off, and through the hanging laundry I could see someone standing there. I froze, my heart dropped. I flipped the lights back on in a hurry and there was no one. I booked it up the stairs and sat beside Kat for the rest of the day. A few shifts went by without anything too unusual, until one day I went to use the upstairs restroom, as there's no bathroom on the main level, and I'd started avoiding the basement altogether. While I was in there, I heard a deep whisper from behind me. I couldn't make out the words, but it was close, and it sent a chill through me. I turned to leave in a panic and slipped on the rug, hitting my head on the way down. I brushed it off because I still needed to be there for Kat, but I was shaken. Now I rushed through any tasks that take me away from the main level. Kat's dementia sometimes causes her to become confused or agitated. She often asks me to leave several times during a shift. It's normal for her. But on one particular day, she didn't ask me to leave at all. Instead, she kept asking someone named Vanessa to go away, but there was no one else in the house. She became very anxious, repeating that Vanessa needed to leave, and didn't want me to leave her for the rest of the day. I tried to reassure her that it was just the two of us and that she was safe, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just confused. Alone, these things might be explained. Her illness, the house, my own nerves, but together, it all felt too connected to ignore. If anyone has any insight, paranormal, psychological, or anything in between, I'm open to it. I just want to keep showing up for Kat the way she needs, but I'm honestly so freaked out. As far as paranormal experiences go, this one still sits with me as one of the most terrifying, even if, on the surface, it might not seem as extreme of some of the stories out there. But fear hits differently when it's real, when you lived it. This happened back in 2013. I was 19 and living at my dad's house, where my bedroom was in the basement. It was late, somewhere past midnight, and I was lying in bed in total darkness. I had school the next day, but as usual, my insomnia had other plans. My body felt weird, like sleep wasn't even in the cards. I lay there for a while, thoughts swirling, when suddenly I heard something faint but clear. A noise. I opened my eyes, but of course I didn't see anything. The room was pitch black, and I told myself it was probably nothing, just the house settling. But then it came again. Scratching. At first it was subtle, almost dismissible. Then it picked up, growing faster and more frantic. I froze as realization crept over me. The sound was coming from under my bed. My eyes widened. My pulse shot through the roof as I tried to rationalize it. Maybe one of our cats had gotten stuck in the room. I clung to that thought. I wanted to believe it was just a cat. But the sound was too intense and deliberate. Then I felt it, scratching and thudding against my back from beneath the mattress. It was like something was trying to punch through the bed. That's the only way I can describe it. Imagine someone trapped inside a coffin, pounding and clawing trying to escape, and I was laying right on top of it. I was frozen, every muscle locked in fear, my brain screaming at me to move, to do something, but I was paralyzed. It went on like that for a while, scratching, pounding, desperation radiating from whatever was under me, until finally something in me snapped. The fear boiled over into pure rage. I jumped out of bed, ran across the room and slammed the lights on and spun back to face whatever it was. I dropped to the floor and yanked up my bedskirt and screamed, "What do you want from me?" Nothing, just dead silence. Just me standing alone in my room. The sound had stopped the moment I left the bed. Somehow I managed to fall asleep that night, but it never really left me. Months passed, then a friend of mine from school moved in with us. She rented a room on the top floor. On her third night in the house, she came to me in the morning looking pale and wide-eyed. "You're not going to believe what happened to me last night," she said. I braced myself. She described the exact same experience I'd had, scratching beneath the bed, punches against the mattress, the fear, the confusion, it was identical. I hadn't told a soul about what happened to me. There's no way she could have known. We sat there staring at each other, both freaked out beyond belief. Whatever it was, it hadn't stayed in the basement. In Snohomish, there's a bar called the Oxford. Over the years, it's been the site of at least 2 or 3 violent deaths, some say murders, and locals will always talk about the strange feeling that the place has. My parents have visited a few times, drawn in by the live bands and lively atmosphere, but they've always heard unsettling stories from staff and regulars. Women locked inside the bathroom, the doors refusing to budge until someone from the outside forced it open, plates shattering in the kitchen when no one was there, unseen figures brushing past patrons, leaving them all with an unshakable chill. But my dad, he experienced something firsthand. One night, he orders a glass of red wine and heads downstairs to the basement bar. The air down there felt stale. The space was dimly lit, lined with pool tables and old bars that had probably seen decades of drunken fights. As he stood there drinking hand, there was a sudden pop. Before he could react, the entire cup of his wineglass shattered. He looked down stunned, his hand still gripping the slender stem. But the most unnerving part, there was no wine, no shards of glass, nothing on the floor, nothing on his clothes. It was as if the drink had vanished along with the glass itself. Dazed, he made over to the bartender, still holding the lone stem. My glass just exploded." Without missing a beat, the bartender took it from him and shrugged. "Yeah, that kind of stuff happens here." She handed him a fresh glass and went back to work like it was nothing. No questions, no surprise. Because at the Oxford, the unexplained isn't uncommon. It's just part of the appeal. This happened about 5 years ago when I was 22. I'd never had any major paranormal experiences before, but I'm Christian, and definitely believed that ghosts, and worse, are real. A few of my friends hit me up, telling me they'd met a ghost hunter who wanted to check out our supposedly haunted house. They asked me to tag along since I'm a big guy at 6'3" and worked security at the time. Basically, I was the muscle in case things got weird. Not that I'm sure muscle has much impact against spirits. When we pulled up, it already felt off. Before I even stepped onto the porch, everyone got chills. Then the ghost hunter, who turned out to be a medium, stumbled out of the house and threw up on the lawn. He'd been there for an hour alone and said, "It's bad in there." We went in and started setting up all the gear. Ovilus spirit box, SLS stick figure cam, the whole paranormal toolkit. For a while it was quiet. A few chills here and there, one of us would hear a noise but nothing weird, until at exactly 11:45 p.m. Suddenly it all popped off. We heard doors creaking open and curtains rustling when no one was near them. The overlist started spitting out perfect Latin, and the stick cam picked up figures walking around, and worse, things crawling on all fours. It felt like the house woke up. After a solid hour of non-stop activity, things went by quietly again. I was already on edge, and when the ghost hunter looked at me, he goes, "Hey, big guy down there." He pointed to the basement. He taught me how to use the spirit box, handed me a half-dead Walmart flashlight, and sent me into the dark alone. I stood there in the basement waiting. At first there was nothing, then something did happen. A chair suddenly lifted up way above my head and exploded into the ceiling. Before I could even react, the spirit box crackled and said one thing: "Burn." Right then the flashlight died. I smacked it back to life in panic, and that's when I saw it. Illuminated right in front of me was a massive figure, taller and broader than I was. And I'm telling you right now, I've been in fights, I've handled dangerous people, but I knew in my gut this thing could kill me. I froze. I wet myself. I didn't even care. I ran for my life. The door to the basement was closed and I could feel the thing behind me, so I slammed into the door so hard it blew off its hinges. I ran straight to my truck, locked the door, and sat there shaking until everyone else came running out. Later, a priest blessed the house, but I'll never forget the fear I felt down there. That was not human. Now I hang around these This happened to me about 5 years ago now, and I still get chills thinking about it. I was renting a small house in a quiet neighborhood at the time. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was cozy, affordable, and had a lot of character. The only thing I didn't love was the crawl space under the house. The access door to it was in the laundry room, a square wooden hatch flush with the door. It was locked from the outside, and I never had any reason to open it. I figured it was just pipes, cobwebs, and the usual creepy crawl space stuff. One evening I came home late from work. It had been a stressful day, and all I wanted to do was shower and collapse into bed. As I stepped inside, I noticed something strange. My laundry room light was on. I was sure I had turned it off that morning, but I chalked it up to being absent-minded in my rush and turned it off again. That night, I woke up at around 2 a.m. to a faint noise. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but as I lay there, I realized it was coming from the laundry room. A soft, rhythmic thumping sound. My heart started to race. I debated whether to get up and check or just stay in bed and hope for it to stop. But curiosity got the better of me, so I grabbed my phone for light and tiptoed to the laundry room. When I opened the door, everything was quiet, but then I saw it. The hatch to the crawl space was slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. I distinctly remember it being locked, and there was no way I could have accidentally opened it. Trying to stay calm, I convinced myself it might be an animal that had somehow gotten in. I shut the hatch tightly and placed a heavy box of detergent on top of it before going back to bed. The next day I called the landlord to ask if there were any pest issues I should know about. He seemed surprised and said no one had reported anything like that before. Still, he promised to send someone over to check it out. That night, I double-checked the hatch and even put a chair on top of it for good measure. I didn't hear any noise, and I started to feel a little bit silly for freaking out. But around 3 a.m. I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. I froze. My bedroom door doesn't creak unless you push it slowly, and I knew I had closed it before bed. I stayed as still as I could, barely breathing, as I heard a soft footstep shuffle into the room. My phone was on the nightstand just out of reach. The footsteps stopped next to my bed. I could feel someone's presence. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and swung it towards the intruder. There was a man crouched on the floor. his face pale and gaunt, his eyes wide and unblinking. He looked just as startled as I was. I screamed and bolted out of the room, running outside to the neighbor's house. I banged on their door until they let me in, and they called the police. When the officers arrived, they found the man still in my house, hiding in the crawl space. He had a small mattress, some food, wrappers, and a collection of random items he must have taken from my house. The lock on the hatch had been tampered with, and from the looks of it, he had been living under my house for at least a few days, perhaps longer. The scariest part? The police said they found a notebook with detailed notes about me. He had written down my daily routine, when I left for work, when I came home, even what I wore. There was also a list of plans, though they wouldn't tell me what was on it. I moved out the next week and stayed with friends until I found a new place. To this day, I have no idea how he got in, or how long he had been watching me before I noticed something was wrong. This happened to me when I was 15, and I'm 55 now. I was alone in my house. My mum and brothers were out for the day, and I was probably just cleaning my room or lost in my own teenage world. That's when suddenly, rising up from the heating vent in the floor, came a sound that froze me in place. A grating, grinding growl of a laugh. It wasn't a cheerful, carefree laugh, no. This was something else entirely. Dark, devious, and threatening. It felt like it had me in its grip, like it knew I was alone and helpless. I stood there rooted to the spot, paralyzed with terror. My mind raced with a million thoughts. There was a demon in the basement. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. To move would be to acknowledge that I had heard it, and somehow I knew that if I let it know I was aware of it, I'd be in even greater danger. Listen, I was only 15, not exactly the pinnacle of rational thinking. Desperately, I tried to rationalize what I heard. Maybe it was my older brother playing a prank on me, but deep down I knew it wasn't. That voice had been too deep, too guttural. Not even a grown man could hit those low, menacing notes. I remained frozen until my mum came home. I couldn't tell her. I couldn't tell anyone. Saying it out loud felt like it might summon the entity back, or let it know that it had succeeded in terrifying me. From that day on, I tried to avoid being alone in the house. The basement in particular became my personal hell. See, I'd always been a scared sort of kid. I used to sing whenever I had to go into the basement because, of course, monsters can't get to you if you're singing. That was my logic, even before the laugh. But something shifted in me over time. I never spoke about the experience, but as the years passed, I found myself getting angry. That voice had scared me, yes, but it hadn't hurt me. It hadn't come after me or tried to get me. All it wanted was the power to make me afraid. That realization slowly chipped away at my fear. One day during a heated fight with one of my brothers, I even hid behind the furnace in the pitch-dark basement. He was too scared to follow me. In that moment, I realized I'd reclaimed the space. It no longer held the same power over me. What's the point of all this? To this day, I believe there is evil in the world, and sometimes it messes with us. But I also believe that fear is its greatest weapon. If we can push past that fear, we find strength we didn't know we had. And where there is fear, there is evil. But there is also hope. When I used to live in Colorado, we lived in a 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom house with a finished basement, which was in a good neighborhood about 20 minutes away from Denver. My mum and stepdad had recently gotten married, which resulted in us going over to his family's house for the holidays. One time we went over to his sister's house for Thanksgiving. Around 15 minutes after arriving, we started talking to his sister Carrie, and we mentioned that we had recently bought a new house. She then offers to pay rent if we would let her move in. My stepdad and my mum talked it over with her, and they eventually came to an agreement for her to move into our basement if she paid rent. A few months later, she moved in. About a few months after she had moved in, My parents would tell me some creepy stories of when they were watching TV in the living room. They told me that one night, they were in the living room watching TV. Take note the TV was next to the basement on another wall to the left, so if you walked around the corner the basement door would be to the left of you, and out of nowhere, a cat toy was thrown up the stairs, and it rolled out into the living room. They claimed they heard someone from the basement say, "Hey, kitty kitty," even though my aunt at the time wasn't home. When we told her about it, she mentioned to my mum and I that her 2 younger brothers and father died in a house fire when she was a teen, and she has believed for the longest time that their spirits have followed her. Another night that my aunt wasn't home, my stepdad said he saw someone peek around the corner of the wall by where the basement was while he watched TV. Fast forward about 8 months later, my aunt eventually moves out, and a bunch of creepy stuff was still happening before this. I was on Xbox and no one was home. I was playing Call of Duty Black Ops 2, and I was in a party talking to a random kid I had met that day and that knew nothing about me. I had to use the restroom, so I told him I would be right back and left my microphone and controller in my room. When I got back, he told me that after I told him I was going to be right back, a little kid said into the microphone that his name was Michael and that me, Colby, was his uncle. I'm not sure what the kid who I was talking to on Xbox said back, but he said he also heard him say, "I have to go now," right before I got back onto the microphone. When he told me this, I knew he was being serious. I'd only met this kid that day, and never mentioned that my house was haunted to him, and no one was home. I went downstairs, scared crapless, and texted my aunt and asked her what her brothers' names were. One of them was Michael, the youngest, and I don't remember her other brother's name. I told her what happened and just sat in the living room shaking until my parents got home, and I gave them the whole story. Many other things happened like that involving those little boys in that house, but that's for another time. Thank you for listening. I'll keep this short and to the point. I've always loved horror. Movies, games, literature, anything that gives me a chill. Ironically, despite my long life fascination with the macabre, I've had no paranormal experiences of my own. My mum used to claim she could see ghosts. When I was a kid, she'd even put on ghost shows and get paid to entertain people at parties. My sister and I never really believed her. My dad would roll his eyes and tell us it was all an act. Whether it was real or not, the point is the supernatural has always been part of the background noise of my life, and I'm not easily shaken. Well, fast forward to now. 2 years ago, my wife and I moved into a new house. Ever since we settled in, she claimed she occasionally sees the figure of an old man sitting at a bar in the basement. It's not like she sees him clearly, just a fleeting presence from the corner of her eye. She says it doesn't feel threatening, just that it's there. It actually tracks with what we know about the house. We bought it from 3 siblings who inherited it after their parents passed away there. The father was a proud, hands-on kind of guy who built the basement bar himself and maintained the house meticulously. Honestly, if I passed away and there was an afterlife, I'd probably hang out in my self-made man cave as well. For the longest time, I wrote everything off as a coincidence or imagination. My office door occasionally locks itself, which is weird, but it's an old house, right? Maybe I was just shutting it oddly, or the latch was sticking. But these last 2 weeks, something shifted. I've been waking up every single night at exactly 3 a.m. I don't set an alarm for that time, but my eyes will snap open like clockwork. I start work at 6, so being awake at 3 is killing me. I can't fall back asleep, and the exhaustion is wearing me down. My mood is off, my patience is thin, and my attempts to rationalize it are getting harder to believe. I keep telling myself it's just stress or coincidence, but every night at 3 a.m., it happens. My family's starting to feel it too. Our cat, who has always slept with us, refuses to stay in the bedroom now. My kid, who used to sleep soundly in his own room, insists on sleeping on the couch with the TV on. He says he doesn't like how quiet the room gets. We recently discovered the previous owner's parents had passed away only a few months before we moved in. That detail lingers in my mind every time I stare at the clock at 3 a.m. I've set up a few GoPro cameras around the house, especially near the basement bar, but there's nothing so far. But that hasn't stopped me from feeling like I'm standing at the edge of just something out of sight. What do you think? Am I overthinking it? Is it just a string of coincidences compounded by sleepless nights? Or am I standing at the start of something different? Either way, if I wake up at 3 a.m. again tonight, I'll let you all know. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's collection of basement stories. I certainly had a lot of fun recording it. I would also like to give a huge thank you to the members and patrons who financially contribute a tiny amount every month to help keep the channel running. If you'd like some exclusive perks like some Skinwalker stories over on, YouTube members and Patreon, as well as having your birthday shouted out and other cool perks, feel free to follow the link in the description to find out more. It means a hell of a lot to me, and I think it's some pretty cool stuff. But that's it. For me, it's time to say goodnight. More content on screen now if you're so inclined, but until next time, stay awesome, and good night.